Hello, I am Henry Keane and we are UATV English. What we do, we debunk Russian propaganda with Ukrainian truth for all our global sake. Please help us by commenting and subscribing to our channel. Welcome to the news polls. Please watch in the episode. No peace, Russia gets ready to continue war. Populists on the rise, Poland and Romania. Vote. Russian targets in Ukrainian Crimea were hit. Trilateral negotiations between delegations from Ukraine, the United States and Turkey have officially begun in Istanbul, according to a statement from Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The talks are taking place at the presidential office in Istanbul, where delegations have already started arriving. The meeting is seen as a significant diplomatic effort to move closer to a resolution of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine. According to the Turkish Foreign Ministry, a meeting between officials from Turkey and the United States and Ukraine was scheduled to begin at 10:45 a.m. Kyiv time, right followed by broader talks, including then with the Russian delegation at 12:30. Well, that's okay. Russians are always a bit late. Kaja Kallas, the top EU diplomat, and Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, the exclusive comments from our correspondent Vitaly Sizov on the matter for you.
Event. I'm just coming out of Antalya. We had a very successful meeting with the foreign ministers of NATO. We have widespread support for an enormous increase in defense spending, which is necessary to keep us safe from the Russian threat, the Chinese military build-up, terrorism, but also widespread agreement that we need to do much more when it comes to defense industrial production. And of course, support for Ukraine, making sure that they have what is needed to stay in the fight and to bring this terrible war to a lasting and durable peace.
But do you have deadline for Putin? Because ball on his side, but he still don't play with the ball.
Yes, he's playing games, which shows that they are not serious about it. We have been clear about the ceasefire, that we want to see ceasefire before we see the talks, but we haven't seen any steps on their side. And like I said, we have the tools, which is our economic tools to put the pressure, but also political tools to put the pressure on Russia.
The United States is represented by Michael Anton, Director of Policy Planning at the U.S. State Department. Ukraine's delegation includes Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha, Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, Deputy Chiefs of Intelligence and the General Staff and Deputy Foreign Minister. Russia's team is headed by Vladimir Medinsky, an aide to dictator Putin. It includes also several other lower-ranks officials, including the head of the Alliance of Writers of Russia. Imagine this. As he promised before, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy left Turkey after meeting with President Erdogan.
Instead of Putin coming to Turkey to meet with President Zelenskyy and have a serious conversation about ending the war and restoring peace, all we hear from Russia is personal insults of the Ukrainian president, Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman Georgy Tighy.
Well, earlier Zelenskyy said he was ready to meet Putin for direct talks with him, as Putin actually insisted at first. However, Putin then declined to act accordingly to his own public demands for whatever the reason might be. And so Zelenskyy had a substantive meeting with President of Turkey Erdogan, which brings hope for future help from Turkey in the diplomatic process. Zelenskyy also called Putin's absence a sign of disrespect, not only towards Ukraine, but also towards Turkey and the United States, which is obvious. I also believe that this is a sign of something way more serious. It is a sign of lack of control of one's demands. And that is the only cause for all dictators in human history to fall. Well, don't believe me. Let's just watch it later. And while Russia emulates diplomacy, its armed forces launched new mass offensive along the front line. Sumy region suffers the harshest blow. Our reporters prepared a report for you.
Russia has launched offensives across all fronts, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy declared during a press conference in Ankara.
The main focus is indeed the Sumy direction. They had concentrated 67,000 troops there. We took corresponding steps to prevent them from consolidating, so they are working on recovering and regrouping.
The Russian army's summer offensive campaign has effectively begun, confirmed Pavlo Shamshin, spokesperson for the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Group. The situation is particularly tense around the village of Liptsy in Kharkiv region, where Russian forces are storming Ukrainian armed forces positions with tanks, other armored vehicles, and motorcycles. Near the village of Dvorechna, by the Oskil River, Russian command is transferring infantry to the right bank to attempt to expand a bridgehead toward Kupiansk. The Vovchansk direction remains a hotspot as well. Despite significant losses, the Russian army continues its assaults, attempting to break through to the administrative borders of Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk regions. Fierce battles are ongoing in the Novopavlivka and Pokrovsk directions. The command of the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Group believes there is no basis to expect Russia to cease fire in the near future, and the Kremlin's claims of readiness for peace talks are a bluff.
I wouldn't dive into what they say on the other side. When dealing with Russians, you need to understand a few things. Russians always lie in public. If they're not lying, they're manipulating. If they're not manipulating, they're preparing to lie. We must perceive all their statements in this light. Pavlo Shamshin, spokesperson for the Kharkiv Operational Tactical Group, on the United News telethon.
Russian command plans to focus on the Pokrovsk and Lyman directions, according to military analyst Oleksandr Musienko.
Russia is already amassing tanks and armored vehicles produced at its own facilities and likely plans to showcase them in Belarus. Where there's no drone threat, equipment is relatively safer than along the front line, where Ukrainian forces have already destroyed a significant amount of enemy armor. Putin is also stalling to show the West the supposed presence of reserves in the Russian army. The goal is to create pressure and push Western partners to hint to Ukraine about the expediency of a compromise with Russia to avoid further escalation of the conflict. Oleksandr Musienko, serviceman of the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, via Telegram.
The Pokrovsk direction in Donetsk region remains a priority for Russia. It is here that the invaders faced a setback in the spring and failed to break through the Ukrainian armed forces' defenses.
We see this as another stage of the Russian Federation's spring offensive, which will clearly transition into the continuation of the summer campaign. The enemy has no strategic successes, not even at the operational tactical level. Despite the intensity of the fighting in Pokrovsk, the enemy still has no advances.
In Donetsk region, the Ukrainian defense forces have improved their tactical positions in key directions.
We are holding the front and breaking the enemy at all critical points. We've reduced our losses by 15%, and in 3 key directions, we've improved our tactical positions. Our warriors gave the occupiers what they deserved. In a month, we nearly doubled the number of eliminated invaders. Serhiy Nayev, commander of the Vuhledar Tactical Group, via Telegram.
Experts believe Russian command will attempt to maximize the use of reserves in the Pokrovsk, Lyman, and Kramatorsk directions.
I would view this not so much as an advance toward Dnipropetrovsk, but as an attempt to reach the southern administrative borders of Donetsk region. Building on this, the enemy is already planning a summer campaign, trying to reach major cities in Donetsk region and engage in battles there.
However, Moscow's resources are not limitless. Russian military command is sending poorly trained recruits into assaults, disregarding colossal losses. According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, this is how Moscow seeks to project the image of a supposedly powerful army and exert pressure on Ukraine during negotiations. Reported by Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.
Now these trilateral talks in turn are being held with the participation of Andriy Sybiha, Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister, Mark Rubio, US Secretary of State Hakan Fidan, Turkish Foreign Minister, and Andriy Yermak, Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. The 3-way discussions, including Ukraine, Russia and Turkey, were set to take place later, but nobody really has illusions, as I said, that these talks are more than purely symbolic act and do not actually convene the real Russian diplomatic effort to resolve the war they have started. Despite Putin's absence, and Zelensky left after meeting with Erdogan, Zelensky has confirmed that Defense Minister Rustem Umerov will stay and will lead Ukraine's delegation in direct discussions with the Russian side. Well, we shall see. No forecast, and we will inform you on whatever happens as soon as we know the results immediately. Now returning back to Europe, we have our reporter and correspondent and our dear colleague and friend Sakenay Murzaev in Rome right today. He works in Italy and the Vatican to keep you posted on the meeting of the defense ministers of European and NATO countries. So without further ado, let's see the news.
The fourth E5 defense ministers meeting in Rome is underway. The defense minister of Italian Republic, Guido Crosetto, the host of this meeting, welcomed in Palazzo Aeronautico, the headquarters of Italian Air Forces, his colleagues from France, from Germany, from Poland and the United Kingdom. Also, European Union representatives are here, and the NATO colleagues, NATO defense assistants of the General Secretary of NATO.
Today's meeting shows that not only have we agreed on important projects, which in itself is half the battle, but that we are quickly implementing them together. Boris Pistorius, Minister of Defense of Germany, during a meeting in Berlin.
The E5 Defense Ministers Format Summit is an informal cooperation format established in response to current geopolitical challenges aimed at reinforcing bridges over NATO and European allies, particularly in the field of European security and defense. It places special focus on supporting Ukraine during Russia's ongoing war. British head of Department of Defense John Healey expressed his opinion on the failed diplomatic processes and Russia's true intentions.
Today reveals the essence of Putin. He says he wants peace, but refuses a full-fledged ceasefire. He says he wants to end hostilities, but continues to strike Ukrainian cities and kill civilians. He says he is ready for talks, but he did not even show up at the conference he himself proposed to hold in Istanbul. John Healey, UK Minister of Defense, during a meeting in Berlin.
The initiative represents a significant step towards greater strategic autonomy for Europe in handling its own security matters while maintaining strong ties with NATO and the European Union. A consequence of the America First policy of the new American administration. The Rome meeting follows previous E5 sessions held in Berlin previous year and in Warsaw and Paris this year earlier, confirming the five nations' shared commitment to continue dialogue and cooperation in the defense domain, which is so needed right now. From Rome, Sakenay Murzaev.
In the morning of May 16th, a series of explosions were heard in temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea, particularly in Yalta, Alupka, Sevastopol and Perevalne. These were strikes on Russian military bases, and losses amongst the occupiers were really inflicted. This was reported by the Telegram channel Krymski Veter, which means Crimean wind. The first explosions were heard by residents of Sevastopol. According to locals, these were drones. And the attack continued right until the early morning light. Explosions also were heard on the Russian military airfields, Belbek and Kacha. In addition, explosions also heard in Simferopol region of Crimea, in particular in Perevalne. Locals report that after the drone attack, it was quite loud right near the military facilities where Coastal Defense Brigade is located. Also, media Krymski Veter, the Wind of Crimea, reports of an ammunition depot of the Russian army called Fire in Perevalne. As a result, the road was blocked and a large number of ambulances and emergency services headed to the site. Guerrilla movement Altesh indicates there are fatalities amongst Russian military personnel.
Agents of Atesh are recording strikes on Russian military facilities in Crimea. Our agents recorded explosions in the area of the settlement of Perevalne, including at the military base of the 126th Separate Guards, Coastal Defense Brigade, and the 8th Separate Artillery Regiment. There is information about Russian soldiers killed while on duty at the depot. From the Atesh Telegram post.
Head of the Center of Countering Disinformation, Andriy Kovalenko, reports that after the overnight drone attack, ammunition depots are still on fire and ammo is detonating. Let's consider a Russian fireworks dedicated to Ukrainian national costume Vyshyvanka Day held just yesterday. Slava Ukraini. Norway plans to complete the delivery of all promised F-16 fighter jets by the end of 2025, but is not yet disclosing how many aircraft have actually arrived in Ukraine. This was reported by NRK, citing Norwegian Defense Minister Tore Sandvik. The head of the Ministry of Defense confirmed that the country plans to deliver all F-16 jets promised to Ukraine last year by the Norwegian government as part of a multinational initiative led by Denmark, the Netherlands and the United States. Sandvik also notes that some aircraft have already been delivered to Kiev, while the remaining deliveries are scheduled to be completed by the end of 2025.
The transfer of Norway's F-16s is proceeding on schedule, but for the sake of Ukraine's operational security and following consultations with the Ukrainian side, we are not disclosing the number of aircraft delivered. With this contribution, Norway is helping to strengthen Ukraine's air defense system in cooperation with other members of the Air Defense Coalition. Tore Sandvik, in a comment to NRK.
The defense minister also recalls Norway's broad support for Ukraine air defense forces. Last year only, the government allocated an additional 1.3 billion krona. We thank Norway sincerely for that aid. It is very much needed and warmly welcomed and appreciated. Also, Poland is preparing another military aid package for Ukraine worth 200 million euros. In an interview with European Pravda, confirms Piotr Lukashevich, head of the Embassy of Poland in Ukraine. The country is preparing its 47th aid package worth around 200 million euros, which will be delivered to Ukraine in the coming month already. The previous military aid package to Ukraine was worth about 230 million euro. In the same interview, Lukashevich stated that the transfer also of Soviet-made MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine is entirely possible and relevant negotiations are already on the way. This becomes feasible because Poland is phasing out these aircraft from its arsenal and replacing them with new F-16s.
I personally firmly believe that Ukraine will emerge from this war as the victor. This is also the position of the Polish government, the Polish parliament, and the overwhelming majority of Poles. Ukraine must win this war, and it will win, and Poland will support you in this. Of course, I can't predict what will happen in 5 or 10 years or who will win the elections, but I can assure you the current state of relations is very good. Piotr Lukasiewicz, head of the Embassy of Poland in Ukraine, in an interview with European Pravda.
Lukashevich also emphasized that the relationship between the two countries will not be affected by anti-Ukrainian statements made by some Polish politicians ahead of the presidential elections in Poland. And, as we can see, it is actually true. Thank you, Poland. The eternal Russian narrative. It always was, Ukraine has already lost and it is only a matter of time when it will acknowledge its defeat. Well, in terms of war, International Institute of Study of War has calculated that given the pace of Russian victorious march during the past 3 years, Russia will be able to capture Ukraine fully in 2256. But what about the realm of politics? Well, indeed, in Romania and in Poland, is there a risk that another Orban or even two Orbans will be elected in these countries and will then publicly call Ukraine bad and all Ukrainian wrong and all pro-Ukrainian people wrongdoing? Well, Romania will hold a second round of presidential elections on Sunday. The first round was won by far-right nationalist George Simeon from the Alliance for the Unity of Romanians, AUR party, whose messages clearly echo the Kremlin's narratives. Oh, don't get me wrong, these narratives sound like absolutely legit ones.
First objective that we have is to reach towards the Romanian audience, the Romanians that are voting here. Voting starts tomorrow morning for our diaspora. This is why tonight I'm going also to Paris. Yes, their vote is important, and our international allies are also very important. We are not isolated, we are not against EU and NATO, how many lied. We are part of the European Conservatives and Reformists, the party of Giorgia Meloni, of Mateusz Morawiecki, and I will be an example of pro-European, pro-NATO president fighting for the interests of the Romanian nation.
Looks nice, right? And he talks nice. Well, this is exactly how you must sound when you are Russian asset. Very, very European you must sound. And he talks about how tired Europe is of that mayhem in Ukraine. And the same is actually happening in Poland. While opinion polls show the liberal Warsaw mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, 53 years old, an ally of the ruling coalition, as a probable winner, although most likely only after a runoff due in June, polling second to replace nationalist ally Andrzej Duda after his 2 terms is amateur boxer and conservative historian Karol Nawrocki, who is backed by the nationalist opposition Law and Justice party. Far-right candidate, also Sławomir Mencen, is third. Fatigue. Right, well, this is what the Kremlin is selling you. Fatigue from the Ukrainian war. This is the main product of Russian propaganda. You see, the Kremlin says, what is it to you, Poles, Romanians, as well as Americans, Germans, Latvians, Lithuanians, Estonians, and all of you Europeans? What difference does it make to you whether Ukraine will be Ukrainian or Russian? There are a whole bunch of problems with Ukraine, right? There'll always be war with us, almighty nuclear power of Russia. You don't need that. You're tired enough already. Look at you. You have a whole bunch of your domestic problems. So why worry about human values? Worry about the cost of gas and oil from Russia.
I have been always voting for people who want normal Poland, cheerful Poland, friendly Poland, for everyone. Here is the place for everyone.
We hear these voices all the time. You know, since Ukraine gained its sovereignty, there always was a Russian pain in the back. So all these populists in Romania and Poland are nothing new. Well, of course, there is a risk of pro-Russian populists, and the risk was always there. And for all these years, the Kremlin did not actually manage to not only destroy Ukraine, but even to make the far-right Romanian and Polish political leaders to act against Ukraine significantly. Talks are easy. Acting is hard. To talk about how bad Ukrainians are, to happen to be so uncomfortably close to Romania and Poland and fighting for their sovereignty there, yes. To use brazen populistic lies? Sure.
The win of Rafał Trzaskowski would actually support current government policy when it comes to the strengthening our European relations, when it comes to supporting the idea of creating or strengthening the common European defense system as well, and working with our European partners in this respect as well, and also would probably mean a continuation of the policy of the current government when it comes to strengthening control over the border with Poland.
But when any anti-Ukrainian politician actually gets to power, they actually counter the necessity to act according to what they promised to their constituency. There always is craving easy solutions, swift results, and an enemy to blame when it all just doesn't work. Such a politician all of a sudden backs down. No matter how much money Russia has poured into its Orbans in Romania and in Poland, these politicians would obviously find it impossible to turn the whole Polish nation against the Ukrainian nation, and that is a wet dream for Putin. Well, can it happen? Let's see. Poland, Romania, and Ukraine geographically, historically, and economically are so much inclined to each other that they, even considering all the modern contradictions and historical issues, always had to stay united way more than to fall apart. And that's it, as simple as that. Simply because it is a natural course of events for all our countries in the region. That seems to be it for tonight. Thank you so very much for watching. We appreciate your presence. Please like, share and comment. Let's debunk Russian lies together, shall we? It was News Pulse. Stay tuned for more and goodbye.